What's today's topic?
Free will.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Oh, got to get David in. Okay. Okay.
Rabbi, how
Um,
long have you been doing it?
We've been doing it for a few weeks. We have like about 4 episodes or something. It's Rabbi Becher and I.
So what did I do to get it? I didn't know you were doing it.
I know. It's called Two Rabbis and a Podcast. You can get it on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. On YouTube, you can see us. On YouTube, you could see us, but it's not a great advantage to be able to see us. And then but otherwise on Apple or Spotify. So like if you have a iPhone and you just do your podcast thing, if you do, it's Two Rabbis and a Podcast, or you could just do Becher and Karsh, or Karsh and Becher. Essentially what it is we've been friends since we were like 17 and in yeshiva together, and we often have conversations about ideas. And he was in town about 2 months ago for the day, and we just spent the day together. And at the end of the day, he just said to me, we should do a podcast, because we have oftentimes these back and forths just about different ideas. Oftentimes when I'm working on some idea, I call him, and he's always teaching and speaking and stuff in different places, and he shares what he's doing. So the thing was, for years, my kids and different people have said to me I should do a podcast, which I did not think, I couldn't think of why, because I'm already getting to teach classes, and some of the classes like this one, they're already on YouTube, and why would I need to do that? But we have fun together, and the thing is, he has such a vast wealth of topics and sources, and he's got this very big reputation as a speaker and a thinker and a writer, and so he's like a kind of a natural draw. Plus, it allows for us to talk about topics and actually present source material instead of just talking about the topic. So there is an educational advantage, because we do go back and forth about topics, but there's, at least at the very basic, there's actual source material being presented, which to me is a big advantage. So yeah, so
How long are the podcasts?
they're about an hour. There's one that's 15 minutes, which is like an introduction to the series, and then each one is about an hour.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Because I have the one from Soloveitchik, Mayor.
Yeah, these are. Yeah, the one thing is that obviously there are people out there that are providing unique material that is quotable. People like Rabbi Soloveitchik, and unique perspectives that are very worthwhile. This is, if you're listening to this, it's just because you want to listen to us. It's not, I don't think you're going to end up with, it's not the same value if you're listening to somebody like Rabbi Soloveitchik, but we're having a good time. That's the main thing. And I look forward to doing it.
What topic has he covered?
So far,
So we talked about, so far we've talked about
Music.
We did music. We did two
Two parts.
on music, and then we did
use it.
one on
You can hit-
is taking the Torah literally, and one on
Ow,
midrash, taking midrash literally,
I missed one.
and I mean that's it. Wait,
Vengeance.
oh no, and vengeance, and one about vengeance. The last
what?
one on vengeance.
Vengeance.
Vengeance, revenge, vengeance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So when
again,
you-
they're
when
not.
you do this, you can go back to the beginning and get the first one.
Yeah, and you can do that. Like if you go to any of those, if you go to Spotify
Use it.
or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, it'll show you all the different ones. Again, there's an intro, and then there's those 5 so far. We're doing another one today. The way we do it it's Zoom between us. So it's he's in New Jersey, I'm here in Chicago, and we're communicating over Zoom, but you can't tell, like on the Apple or Spotify where it's audio, you can't tell what the format is. It just sounds like we're talking to each other, on the YouTube, you can tell that we're doing it over Zoom.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll try to do it. Get on.
Okay.
My whole day is probably most of my day is spent listening to rabbis, podcasts and stuff.
It's not a bad way to spend your day, my friend.
There's one of them that's from the. I don't know if you would like it, but I like it very much. It's called The Pen and the Yad
Oh yeah,
from
I've
Rabbi
seen it.
Siegel.
Right.
Rabbi Siegel and Jonathan Eig, who's
Yeah.
the Pulitzer Prize winner for his book about Martin Luther King.
Yeah,
And they-
I've seen it. I haven't. I think I listened to a few minutes of one of them. Yeah.
So they talk about the parsha of the week in what's the word, in response to what's going on in the world now.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
it's really good. Nice thing it's 15 minutes. You know what I mean? So
Right.
you're
Yeah.
done.
So ours is a little more. The thing is, we want it to be substantive. The problem is these are such big subjects, so you're not covering anything exhaustively. You're getting a chance. So we're getting a chance to look at some of the sources and then talk a little bit about it. But I still, if somebody, I still have some of my original reservations which is that in the end you could ask, like, what did you really accomplish with it? The main thing for me and him is that we're just doing it. We look forward to talking
Just
about
look
these
forward
things
to getting
together.
it done.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's more like a shared conversation about it, but it's not all these subjects. If you were really going to do a complete treatment of any of these subjects, it would be, many. It would require many episodes, and so we're of course not going to be able to do that. So the goal is to have some kind of a substantive conversation and to touch on some of the important points. He himself, let's say on a topic like free will, he teaches it as a course, but there are people that have written, like Rabbi Akiva Tatz has written a book about this. Rabbi David Gottlieb has a series of lectures. Because what happens is there's the basic notion that you start with. You start with a simple notion of free will, but then there's all these questions that come up. And now when you're dealing with the questions, that simple notion starts to become more complex. And as you add each question, it adds layers and layers to it. And so, there are many questions that deserve to be discussed. And so you end up, a book is not enough by the time you're finished to discussing it. So that'll be part of what we talk about. Okay.
Wait, just say something.
What did?
Just one. The question of free will has historically has been the most dominant question in philosophy since the beginning of philosophy. And it hasn't, the agitation over it has not disappeared. It still is full of fight and zeal as it was.
Or some. Because you have people like Sam Harris saying there's no, yeah, okay. Anyway.
Yeah, no, so I that will of course be acknowledged. Specifically, when I talk to him about it, and I've had this conversation with Akiva Tatz, and this will be part of what we get into after, you know, talking a bit about it, is that can we / should we be pragmatic when it comes to free will, acknowledging the fact that it begins as a kind of simple notion and then by degree becomes more and more complex, acknowledging that, and acknowledging that any answers that anybody comes up with are modern, relatively modern. I mean, whatever. Relatively modern. You can
No,
say
they
Rambam.
are. But
They're
they're-
relatively modern. They're relatively,
no,
because let's say it's the
now-
Rambam talking about it. I'm still calling the Rambam relatively modern because it's, in other words,
Oh.
they're as far as the Torah, you know, relative to the Torah, they are not part of what we would call Chazal. There is no treatment by Chazal. So, and to me, that suggests that there is no Masorah. There isn't something you would call our Masorah. What is our tradition when it comes to it? So you have the, you know, you have the greatest authorities. We're spending all our time talking about the Rambam, you know, learning the Rambam here. Obviously, he's hugely important when it comes to, you know, to dealing with these. But let's say you have a resolution of the Rambam, or you have a resolution of Rabbeinu Yonah or the Ramban, or you have you know, the very modern questions and resolutions. These, you can't say that these represent an actual Masorah, a tradition. The tradition is that there's free will, but explaining it is the intellectual effort of a lot of well-meaning, very knowledgeable people. But you can't say it's our tradition per se. What the reason the reason that that matters to me is because if I'm, and we've had this conversation, if I'm working on my avodas Hashem, I'm trying to serve God, and part of my service of God is an attitude. I have an attitude. So my attitude is that God is present in my life, and that He cares about what I do, and He is involved in helping, and he shapes the world that I live in. So at some point, I live with an attitude which I will call my faith. So, and my faith is important to my motivation, and it's also important for my interpretation of real-time events and my role in them. So we have come to speak about something called emunah pshuta, which means what is often called simple faith. Now, different people have a different explanation for how that works and how they incorporate it in their life. But there is an attitude that God is supervising what's going on. He's involved in the various elements of my, here, one second. Hi, Wilbert. Hi, how are you?
I got a phone call from Paul.
Yeah.
How you doing? He said, I'm doing fine. He says, I have something for you.
Yeah.
And he says to me, if you don't want it, he says, it's kosher.
Yeah.
25 pounds of frozen chicken breast.
So how is it
Kosher.
How is it kosher? Paul, from Paul?
From Paul. I swear to God, I'm not lying to you. I went to his house.
Okay. Where did he get them from?
I have no foolish idea.
Okay. Wilbert, you are a
Listen,
messenger.
seriously, if you
You
don't
are-
want it, buy it for the back.
Okay, you are a messenger from.
And I got myself some good. I got a girlfriend too.
I'm so proud of you.
Your wife okay?
Yeah, she's
Okay.
doing well. It's really
And
good to
then,
see.
don't be mad at me. If it's not desirable,
Thank you.
it's sealed up. It's
Okay.
never been opened.
Thank you, Wilbert.
Goodbye.
All right, be well. You gotta love that. Okay. Anyway.
Wow. Wow. He's somebody worth knowing.
I haven't looked at it yet. I'm not quite sure about the kashas of it, but that he is a fascinating gentleman whose last name is Feinstein, believe it or not. Wilbur Feinstein. He's a handyman who came along with our house. We lease our house from a man named Paul Lewandowski, who is Polish. So whenever there's something we need fixed around the house, we always call him, and he's a real character. And Paul is Polish, and somehow Paul has decided that these chicken wings are kosher. We'll see. But anyways, I think that's a good interruption for our discussion about God running the world. So let's say, this notion is called Emuna Pshuta. So just to define Emuna here, I'm going to use something that Ramosha Shapiro of blessed memory used to say, which is that Emuna is living emet. So once you have a basic principle that you've determined is true, now you're trying to live that truth. So Emuna is the kind of faith that, in other words, the practice, we'll call it, the practice of living that truth. So let's say you take something like free will. And so it's not simply, for some people, it could be a, just say interesting theological discussion. But if you're trying to live, if you're trying to live in your service of God, if you're trying to live with Emuna Pshuta, with a kind of simple faith, which is you've got a truth, and now you're trying to live with it. This is just most likely you're going to try to reduce it to its most simple form, because you've got to apply it in all these different ways, and you've got to really live it. So, so let's say for somebody like me, I'm living my life with this model. Hashem runs the world. Hashem runs, he knows everything that's going to happen. He's all powerful. And he has my best interest in mind. That's an important part of this. He has my best interest in mind, which means I don't always know what is the best for me, but he does. And what he wants for me is to make best choices. I'm going to, with whatever knowledge I have, I'm going to make best choices. When I make the wrong choice, there's consequences. When I make the right choice, there's consequences, but it's in that kind of context. So for me, when I look at free will, I need to get some kind of information that's going to fit into my avodas Hashem. Now, if there's information that's coming up, let's say a big piece of this has been attributed to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Reb Chaim ben Attar. He suggested that somebody else can act with their own free will. It's their free will. They're acting with their free will in a way that will interfere with what is best for me. When I say best for me, what God thinks is best for me. It will interfere with what God thinks is best for me. They can make a choice that will interfere in my life in a way that messes with my with my emunah pshuta, because my emunah pshuta, my simple faith, suggests that God is running everything, and He has an idea of what's best for me, and He's going to make sure that happens. But it seems like, from this opinion of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, that that's not always going to be the case, that somebody else can use their free will and they can mess with what's best for me. Now, I would like to argue that since these are all just people's thinking about this, trying to resolve problems that arise once free will comes onto the thing, and they even, like Akiva Tatz suggests, that this is not just the Or HaChaim, that this opinion is the opinion of most early authorities, most Rishonim hold like the Or HaChaim. So my response to Akiva Tatz and to Mordechai Becher has been, I'm grateful for this discussion, but this discussion is not our Masorah. In other words, this discussion is a lot of people trying to resolve a lot of problems, and they're very intelligent and they're working things out. But this, I should have a right to decide what I'm going to include in my service of God, because my service in God, it can't be on hold. I can't be thinking, well, I'm going to have a worldview which is contingent upon like 100 different possibilities of something. Well, if it's like this, then it's this. If it's like that, then it's like that. This person holds like that. This person holds like that. That's fine when you're having a discussion that's going to lead to a halachic thing, but it's not in my everyday working world. As I move through it, I can't be working with contingencies like that. So is there a place to say, I'm sticking with the simple model and I'm ignoring these points that are being made by people that do not represent what I'm calling Masorah? They're not representing. The fact that we have free will it is in the Torah, and it's an important part of the Masorah, and it's important to me to know that when I get into a situation, I am expected to make the right choice, no matter how difficult it is, and that I always can. Now, if somebody's going to suggest to me, well, there might be situations that you can't or whatever, you could go ahead and think like that all you want. I'm not thinking like that, and I don't have to. I don't have to include your thinking about that, even if you're the Rambam. I don't have to include that in my worldview, because the Masorah is we have free will. And if you're saying to me, what about this and what about that? I'll say to you, great questions, mystery. Free will, I get it. I get the questions, but I'm not going to change my approach to serving God because you have questions. That is not that my approach to serving God is founded on a principle that we agree on. Your questions are not founded on a principle. They're your intellect, which is important and deserves a space in the classroom, but not in actual life. So that's the question. The short version of that question is, if free will contradicts, if the discussion of free will, not free will, the discussion of free will contradicts what we call emuna pshuta, which is simple faith, do I have a right to just ignore the discussion? So, part of Mordechai's comeback to me is this notion of emuna pshuta that you're talking about is a modern notion. It's not, this is going to be, this is going to be at the end of it. This is not the first word. Obviously, it's going to be educating. What are the basic notions? And even that, we're not going to be able to cover everything. But then after we've done the basic notions, maybe come up with one example where it looks like it interferes, which is the Orach Chaim. Because so far, when I've asked people who spend a lot of time talking about the Orach Chaim, which both Reb Akiva Tatz and Mordechai Becher, and in truth, Rebbe Gottlieb and others who've spent a lot of time on this stuff, when they bring it up as a fascinating point and something that needs to be discussed. But my question to them is, have you considered what this does to emuna pshuta? You're going out there teaching this to people who are working their way through the world with what we'll call simple faith. And are you considering what you're doing to people with simple faith? And then besides that, which is my attitude, I look at it and I go, fine, I get it. The Rambam is acknowledging massive questions. They are massive questions about the subject. I took a course when I was studying for my in college, and I studied Skinner. We read one of his books about free will. I think it was called The Illusion of Free Will or something like that. I had a more provocative title. And so I've read at least Skinner. I haven't read a lot of other people about free will. And Mordechai had some book he was using, which he sent to me, which is a small book on free will, which are all fascinating, and the subject's very fascinating. But do I have a right to look at it and go, I get it. I get there's big questions, but there's mysteries. We live with mysteries. So you have a bunch of questions about it, and I hear the questions, and you have clever answers to them, and they are clever, fascinating and clever. But can I ignore it because I've got to get on with the business of living in a relationship with God, and it can't wait around for people to solve all these problems. Something like that.
I love your view, but it's a very modern view of the relationship between free will and ethics. It might not be part of our Masorah, but it's certainly one of the principles of reward and punishment. And without free will, those things.
No, I know. No, I'm saying free will is.
I know, I understand that. But when
the original notion of free will is that it exists.
Yeah. But it's not part of. It may not be part of Masorah, but like the Rambam would say, if we have interlocutors that are, we have to engage in debate, we have to give some answer.
I get it. No, I get it. I'm not.
No.
But at some point, like the reason I was sort of asking Rabbi Tatz, it was a brief thing with him, with Mordechai, it's been more back and forth. But do they have some responsibility when they're teaching it to acknowledge that this could interfere?
Of course.
Yeah.
That generally is credited to Peter Strawson. He was a very famous philosopher, and this was sort of the gist of what he was saying. The general principle, like the question he asks, supposing you're an incompatibilist, you don't believe that free will and determinism go together, and then tomorrow you found out that some brilliant scientist had discovered that determinism was a true thing. which means that it's incompatible with free will according to the argument. So you don't have free will. Would you change anything about yourself? And the answer to the Strawson's broad answer to that was no. It doesn't make sense. It's indispensable to the fabric of our relationships. You're not going to forsake love. You're not going to forsake hatred. You're not going to forsake the emotionally reactive attitudes that you have. In your case, it happens to be your general outlook on life.
Right, except the only thing here is, to me, the only thing I would see, I'm not ready to go that far. Maybe I don't have to go as far. Let's say one of Rebbe Gottlieb's things was that there are elements like, and again, it's been decades since I listened to him talk about free will and determinism, but he was even suggesting that new understanding of the how, you know, the rules of the subatomic world. What's it called again when we talk about that?
Quantum indeterminacy.
Yeah. So it has sort of upset our understanding of cause and effect. You know, and there could it. In other words, you on one plane you could think you finally resolved it, and then you find a new plane that has suddenly shown you how something that came after is actually causing something that came before, or and sort of upsets the apple cart in a way that now something that you thought you had demonstrated on one plane, it now somehow is on a different plane is working, you know, the opposite of what you understood, or in ways that don't make sense, based on the laws that you've already seen there. So to me, it's more like I'm more working with the notion that there's always the next step when we're grappling with the understanding of the universe. There's always some next step that potentially upsets an apple cart and changes what we took for granted as axiomatic. But yeah, so I don't feel I have to go to the point where what if one day it was proven we don't have free will. But I'm not, because if I go that part, I don't feel like I need to go to yet. I mean, I guess it's something that somebody has to think about. But I'm more working in a world where we'll accept that these discussions are happening in a kind of fluid environment, and go back to saying, how sacred is this discussion? Like, is there a distinction? Rav Shimshon Fol Hirsch, Mordechai and I, when we were talking, when we were talking about Midrash, like how little is Midrash. So he shared some writings of Rav Shimshon Fol Hirsch that are actually in his collected, they have these collected writings of his, where he says something similar about Medrash. We didn't want to go there with it because it would open up too much of an apple cart. But he even says it about certain Midrashim, that he said, Rav Shimshon Fol Hirsch says there are Midrashim, and you can tell by how some of the Rishonim treat these Midrashim, that they clearly did not think these Midrashim necessarily represented what we'll call a Masorah. It's a scary place to go with Medrash, but he was even saying, like, because like Rashi will quote a Medrash and he'll say, Eino nira ba'enai. It doesn't, I don't agree. It doesn't make sense to me. And the Ramban and Chumash will do that sometimes. It's wrong. It's not right. So it seems like they felt that these midrashim were the teachings of Tanoim and Amoraim, but they did not necessarily represent a Masorah from Sinai. You know, they are teaching ideas as they understand them. And the question is, do we take them as the wisdom of sages, or do you take them, because free will is from the Torah, the original notion. So we accept the notion that somehow there is free will from the Torah, or at least we're supposed to believe that there is free will from the Torah. I once asked Rav Shlomo Fisher, who was this mind-boggling genius of a rabbi who taught in Itri, and I once asked him the determinism and the free will thing. Is it possible that it's a deterministic world, and would the Torah make sense in a deterministic world? And he said there is a way to say the Torah makes sense in a deterministic world, that the Torah is asking us to act like this, and it wants us to live like this, even whether or not it's ultimately the case. But then he changed. Then the next day, he told my friend and I, Akiva Tor, he came back to us and he said, "I changed my mind." Now he is somebody like who must have thought about this for years before he talked to us, because he was one of these people who he knew all of philosophy, he knew all of Chazal, he knew, like he was really somebody who knew. He had a photographic memory, and all he did was learn since he was a child, and revered as a scholar, like in all circles. But he came back to us and said, "Forget what I said yesterday. It's not possible." So I don't know what that was. That was like a day where he went back and forth on it. But yeah. So the thing is that how do you have to treat it? Do you treat these conversations as sacred conversations? Sacred in the sense that you must accept them like canonically, axiomatically, or this is wisdom from elders which need to be revered, but it's not the same thing as Masorah. And I can I ignore it?
I just want to say that I wasn't trying to put you into a position or even dive into denying that there's free will, but that the belief in free will, it has its own independent justification. You needn't rely on the metaphysical features of free will in order to justify acting in their way. So there's really no nafkamina.
Yeah.
Does that reflect your thinking? I think it does.
Yeah. Thing is, how to have this is going to be part of our challenge today, is how to have this conversation in a relatively brief, an hour doesn't seem long enough to
an hour.
This conversation. This is how we're going to do it. We'll see what happens. To just touch on it, we're just bringing up the issues and we're not resolving it. But that's where it's mainly going. That's why I care, that I was motivated to talk about it. It may be that it needs more than one session. We'll see what happens. All right, thank you. I thank you for having. I know it was a departure from what we're doing, but we got there through stream of consciousness, but it was useful for me to have this talk before I have the talk later on. Thank you.
I am so grateful.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Okay.
Tomorrow.